There's a bunch of answers to that question, and some of them are predictable, like resilience or a strong sense of optimism, the ability to get back up when you get knocked down. And those are all true. Like, you have to have that. But the one thing, because not every person I've interviewed has gone to college or is educated. They're not all book smart. They're not all charismatic. They're not, they're different. They're like us, right? But the one thing that binds every person I interview is they all either have naturally or have learned to develop the ability to withstand rejection, to basically accept that lots of people are going to say no and keep kind of grinding through it.
It's one of the hardest things is to deal with rejection, deal with people judging you, deal with people saying that, like, this is bad, this is horrible, this isn't going to work. It's because you want that confirmation. We want confirmation when we're doing something of like, yes, you're amazing, go do it. But when everyone's saying no, and you can go through it, because at some point, great entrepreneurs are going to get people to say no.
Yes.
And you got to learn how to get through it.
I interviewed this guy, Topio Otana, a couple weeks ago, and he founded this company called Calendly. Have you ever used Calendly? It's a really great.
I mean, everyone for podcast interviews, it's like all we do is schedule calendars. Yeah.
So he started this, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years ago. And his first job, while he was a college student, was selling ADT home monitoring services door to door, right? So he's in Athens, Georgia, and he's this kid who's from Nigeria. He came to the U.S. when he was 16. And he's going door to door in Athens, Georgia, selling, knocking on doors, trying to sell people home monitoring systems. And I said to him, Tope, didn't you ever get discouraged with all those doors slamming in your face? Didn't you tired of hearing people saying, like, no soliciting? And he said, no, because I knew that there was a hit rate. And, eventually one of those doors would open and the person would say yes, and I would make a commission on that sale. And that was more money than I ever had in my life. So it was fine. I mean, it's a similar story with Sarah Blakely, who founded Spanx. Like, she sold fax machines door to door. She describes it as torture, but it steeled her when it came time to starting her business. Like, she had to find a textile manufacturer that was willing to make a prototype of these undergarments that no one had ever seen before. And all of these textile plants said no until one finally said yes. But she was ready for that process because she had gone through, like, rejection exposure therapy.
Exactly. Yeah. She had a PhD in rejection for, I think it was 6 or 7 years she was doing door to door.
Yeah.
And do you think it's harder to get successful or to stay successful as entrepreneurs? Is it easier to, like, okay, I made something work, this was a success, or is it easier once you get there to maintain?
It's a great question. I mean, I haven't put a lot of thought into it, but here's what I would say. I think getting to a place where you have found some success, it's sort of like finding lift. It's like when an airplane, takes lift, and then you hit cruising altitude at 35,000 feet, and there will be turbulence. But I think that in general, in my experience, I think once you have achieved some level of success, it's easier to build on that because people have seen you succeed in some fashion or form. Like what I do, what you do. I mean, 25 years ago, when I started out on radio before it was podcasting, I couldn't get on the air. Why would somebody give me a chance? Right. I had no track record. No one knew who I was. Nobody knew if I was any good. And I sucked, by the way.
Right.
That's how it is. You suck when you start. You suck, and then you suck less, and then a little less and a little less. But, once I started to go on air, it was like that domino falls. And other people's like, oh yeah, you can do a story, or sure, we'll take your pitch. And it's the same thing with entrepreneurship, which is once it doesn't mean that you're going to, if you start a billion, like, is Kevin Systrom going to be able to found another $1 billion Instagram company? Probably not. I mean, but will he continue to be successful in any endeavor he does? Yeah. And he'll also have some failures, but he has that sort of, and most entrepreneurs who have achieved something, who've created something and built something, even things that have failed, they have that, like, that lift, that keeps them flying.
And do you think anyone can be a thriving, successful entrepreneur? I mean, like sustainably making money and having a business with customers. Do you think it's possible for anyone, or some of us just not wired? Because when I was a kid growing up, I was never into baseball cards. I didn't do the lemonade stand thing. I never made any money. I was like an athlete, and I didn't know the concept of here's a value, here's a skill, go sell it, try to get some money. I didn't know that concept until I was 25, and I needed to make money until it was a necessity and there was no other way. And 2008 happened, there was no jobs, and I was like, well, I got to figure out what I'm going to do to survive.
Yeah.
Is it a thing that people can learn, or is it kind of you either got or you don't?
I'm a 1,000% believer that virtually every skill that entrepreneurs have are acquired. Now, there are some people, like Mark Cuban is a good example of just a freak of nature. Like when he was in his teens, he read a book called How to Retire at Age 35. Okay. He wanted to become he was determined to become a millionaire by age 30. He picked a college program where he could graduate in 3 years to save money. He instantly went to Dallas because he thought there were opportunities there. He got a job bartending at night because he knew it would stuff his pockets with tips. And in the daytime, he started selling computer software. I mean, he was a millionaire by age 30. But he's a freak of nature, right? In that sense. I think most entrepreneurs acquire these skills over time. I mean, let's go back to rejection for a moment. So some people are just naturally easier with it, right? Like you remember, you probably knew like that guy in high school who would just ask 100 people out on dates, and he wouldn't care if 99 of them said no because he knew that one would eventually say yes, right?
Yeah.
Now, I was not that kid. You might not have been that.
I was not that kid. I was terrified of girls.
I was terrified, right? I was terrified of people saying like no. Yeah. So it's sort of a weird kind of example, but you know, the idea of going door to door to sell something or pitching people on your product, going to investors, it's really hard. It requires the ability to hear no and to keep fighting. And, you know, one of the insights that I learned from the show is just in this weird, it's like this weird thing that's happened, which is that I have ended up interviewing a significant number of Mormon entrepreneurs. Okay. Now, Mormons are a tiny percentage of the American population, like 2%. Okay. And they have a pretty significantly high rate of entrepreneurship in their community, in their culture, and also business success. So what is it that they're doing differently? Well, they're doing something very different than pretty much every other population in America.
They're like door-to-door salesmen.
They send their 18-year-olds to a country around the world, and they say, go live somewhere for 2 years and get as many converts as you can. You're going to have to knock on 1,000 doors to get 5-10 people to accept the Book of Mormon.
And you have to learn the new language and speak a different language out of your comfort zone.
Perfectly. And you've got to pay your own way. And by the way, you have to be polite and gracious and friendly. You can't be like, why are you slamming the door in my face? Like, you are a Mormon missionary. You're representing the church. Like, you've got to be really polite and friendly and kind. So those kids go abroad for 2 years. They come back to the U.S., Utah, or wherever. They start college. They are way more equipped than your average 21-year-old to start their lives and also to start a business. And it's a story that I've heard from David Neeleman, the founder of JetBlue. It's a story, you know, I've heard from Joel Clark, the founder of Kodiak Cakes, the protein powder pancakes. He got back from his mission in Australia and he started this company, this business. He had no fear of going door to door to sell pancake mix. And so I'm not suggesting that everybody become a Mormon. I'm saying that what I'm saying is that it's a really interesting kind of case study. You know, I don't think the church deliberately, setting its young people up to be entrepreneurs, but it's setting them up to be independent. And so that's a learned skill. I mean, Mormons are not more preternaturally more gifted in rejection, of the ability to withstand rejection. They just had 2 years of it. So they're better at it. And I think all of us can kind of replicate that in a sense.
Yeah, I don't know if you've read the book Influence by Cialdini, or if you've studied any of his work, but it's essentially how to influence people. And a lot of people use it in business and marketing for like their sales pages and things like that. And a lot of sites like Amazon use the strategies. One might be social proof. One is likability, testimonials, all that different type of stuff. And I have a lot of Mormon friends as well who are in the entrepreneurial world, and they just all seem to be successful. I'm like, I don't know It's amazing, but it's like they all kind of follow these principles where, like you just said, it's like they're all very kind, and people want to do business with kind people.
Right.
They listen well, so you always feel like you're the most interesting person in the room when they're just asking questions and listening.
Yeah.
They are, they usually come with a gift. Like they'll give you, even if it's a book, it's like they're giving you a gift where you want to reciprocate, the law of reciprocity. And it's like they're following these natural ways of like building connection and building anticipation and desire that just translates into their life in business in a beautiful way. So
yeah,
I agree. And I think if everyone went door to door for a month, you would probably gain a lot of wisdom. But imagine having to learn a new language and go door to door for 2 years.
Yeah.
Without your friends. You don't speak to your friends and family for, I think, 6 months at a time or something like that.
Yep.
You're out of your comfort zone.
Totally. And by the way, when I was a kid, and this is in the in the 80s, like school fundraisers were going door to door to sell chocolate bars. Now, of course,
yes,
they don't allow that anymore because of safety reasons, even though on every objective standard, the United States is a much safer country today than it was in the 1980s. But, in the 80s, my parents were like, yeah, go sell your chocolate bars. And I would just walk around the neighborhood and knock on doors. And, now I think it would be a little bit harder. But, kids were kind of exposed to that more than they are today. I feel like when I was a kid, not to say that like it was better when I was younger. It's just to say that these are things that you can do, you can instill in yourself and in the people you know.
Why is it so hard for us to learn about how to manage rejection? If that's the main skill, the number one key to success for a lot of these people is the ability to overcome rejection. Why is it so hard for us as humans to deal with that?
Well, there's a really famous professor at Harvard named Ron Heifetz. He teaches a course on leadership, and he has this concept where he looks at successful and highly effective leaders, and basically what they do is they're able to kind of step out of their own bodies and stand on a proverbial balcony and look down at themselves in the situation they're in. Like Barack Obama is a really good example of this. He can just remove himself from a situation and just look and assess the whole situation. And it's almost like you've hired an outside consultant to tell you what you're doing wrong. Most of us don't do that. It's very hard to do that. It requires a lot of practice and training. I don't do that, And, I think we tend to hope that the product or the idea or the concept that we're talking about will be validated by the people we know or even people we don't know because we believe in it. And I think for most of us, our passion and our belief and our connection and commitment to that can be fairly easily shattered if enough people are like, this sucks or this is stupid. But what I think this kind of rejection / going to the balcony technique does is it enables you to take the long view and to say, no, I mean, here's a great example. Tristan Walker, one of my favorite entrepreneurs I ever interviewed. He started this company called Bevel, okay? Now, here's the thing that most white men don't know. Most white men who shave, go and buy a razor. You get the Gillette 5-blade or 6-blade or 8-blade.
Mach 3, Mach 7, whatever, yeah.
And you like it because it has 5 blades and shaves your skin, and it actually shaves under your skin. Well, if you have, curly hair, and many African-American men do, that's not actually good for your skin. And so shaving is really, as Tristan explained, it's very traumatic, especially when young black men start to shave because you
break out, you get bumps.
Razor bumps and scars. And there are no products that have spoken or have really been developed for young black men. And so he set out to build a razor. It's called the Bevel. And he didn't want it to be like this razor that you found at like the bottom of the ethnic aisle. He wanted it to be like an iPhone. He wanted it to be a beautiful razor in like a beautiful box that was right there next to Gillette and whatever else and was as premium. And, he had a lot of people saying, there's no market for this, or, even though he knew that African Americans spend more on beauty products proportionally than almost any community in America. He really, and what he said to me was, I said, how were you able to keep going when you kept hearing no? When there were people who were saying, this is going nowhere. And he said, I kept going because I knew that if I couldn't make this work, nobody could make this work, and it was never going to see the light of day. But I also knew that it had to see the light of day because I needed it for me, and I knew a lot of other men needed it for them too. And it's just such an inspiring idea,